Our scripture reading for this morning, comes from the very tail end of a passage in the Gospel of Matthew that we've been spending time on for the last few weeks. As a whole, this is known as the missionary discourse, which is to say that this is the time when Jesus is sending out his disciples. They become apostles, tasked with his same ministry, preaching the good news and healing those who need it. This comes from the very end, Matthew chapter 10, verses 40 through 42. Jesus said, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever even gives a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward." May God add understanding to the hearing of these words. And will you pray with me, please? Holy and gracious God, be within us and among us as we turn our hearts and our minds to you. Amen. A colleague of mine who was smarter than I was, he still is, and had done his homework on this passage once completely changed how I thought of it. I had always, I think understandably, I'd always heard Jesus talking about giving a cup of cool water to these little ones, and I pictured him gathering a small child onto his knee as a, well, if not as a prop, then at least as a visual aid, we'll say. So here's a little one, as I cast it in my mind, which is I think what many of us do when we're picturing a scene like this. Here's a little one, a young girl, a young boy, maybe looking thirsty enough to give a good tug on our heartstrings, vulnerable, but not so desperate as to make people sad, and handing this young one, this little one, a cup of cool water. Who could object to that? I mean, who wouldn't do that? How sweet, how nice, what a gentle and gracious thing to do, this Jesus, so good with kids. And he might well be. We know he blesses the little children, and we know he's compassionate, and we know he's not above using a visual aid to get his point across. But that's not actually what's happening here. What my colleague who had done his homework told me, and what broke that vision for me, was that this isn't what the words little ones means here. What Jesus means here when he says little ones, and what he means elsewhere when he says little ones, is little ones in the faith. He means those who are just beginning in their faith, just starting out, still vulnerable, that the world better be gentle to. His disciples here are the little ones, and they are just, in terms of their faith, just starting to walk on their own 2 feet. So knowing that, it didn't just break down the vision I had, it also broke open my understanding of what was happening in this message. Because now this wasn't just about some base level of kindness to vulnerable kids. Again, who wouldn't do that? It wasn't just about what we all can do, which, as my grandmother-in-law used to say, it's nice to be nice to the nice. It was all of a sudden about adults and strangers, about real life. Not just about stuff we would all do, but about stuff that most of us would rather not do. These little ones that he's sending out, his disciples, as he said, commissioning them to be apostles and take on his ministry, because at this point his ministry needs all hands on deck. He's sending them out as wandering, itinerant preachers and healers. And in the gospel, he has spent the last several paragraphs, for us it's been the last few weeks, telling them how hard it would be for them out there. He said, they won't receive you. Not all of them. Be ready to shake the dust off your feet and move on from that house, move on from that town. He said, if they call me the son of a demon, imagine what they're going to call you. He said, the message you bring, for some reason, will not be welcomed by all people and will in fact divide you in ways that might break your heart. This truth I'm giving you will make you separate from those who are not ready to receive it. It will divide you from your father and your mother and your sons and your daughters and as Pastor Page preached last week, how many of us are feeling that divide right now? How many of us are living that divide with those we love? And it's in the middle of that message to them, it's as though he switches to us. It is as though he switches his audience, switches his target. It's no longer about a message to the little ones he is sending out. It's as a message to everyone who is supposed to be there to welcome them. They will show up in your town, at your house, he says, with no place to stay, with nothing to eat, and they will rely on your hospitality to make it. And that's just physically. When it comes to their mission, they will also rely on your spiritual readiness, on your faith, to do what they are really there to do, to make their going there worth it. And so this passage, again, instead of being about simple charity, who can muster the goodness to give a child a cup of cool water? Again, not wrong, but not particularly challenging. Instead of simple charity, this has become about fully fledged, full-blooded hospitality. It becomes about welcoming other adults who are working hard to tell the truth they've been given, many of whom are still vulnerable, still easy to shake in their faith, still easy to discourage. Welcome them as you are welcoming God, Jesus says, because in a real way, you are. He says, whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. To welcome them is to welcome me, and whoever to welcome me is to welcome God. And so that in the transitive property of holy hospitality, to welcome them is to welcome God. And maybe there's even a better word for it than welcome. As it was translated in the Bible of one of our Bible study members this week, hi Gina Grant, instead of welcome them, it said receive them. Receive the prophets. Receive the righteous. Receive these little ones. And in doing this, you will be receiving God. And I love this language of receiving because it's the language we use for gifts. Receive these apostles, these little ones, Jesus said, as you would a gift, because they are a gift. Receive the prophets, the tellers of truths, as you would a gift, because they are a gift. And care for the vulnerable as you would care for a gift, because they are a gift. At its heart, this passage is about hospitality, which is a pretty clear on the first read. It's probably pretty obvious, and most likely a message you have heard many, many times. But that doesn't mean it's not challenging. Because hospitality, while it might be pretty simple on its face, it has never been easy. It's hardly ever been easy because, let's be honest, people can be pretty hard to like. People will sometimes exhaust you. They will take you for granted. They will take advantage of you. Some people are toxic, or at least in a toxic place. Some people cannot or will not return the grace that you've given them. Some people are just downright unsafe to be around sometimes. See, people are often selfish and obnoxious and greedy and ignorant. And when it comes down to it, I can think of a lot of people I don't want in my house, around my family. I imagine you can too. But just because people are hard to love, and we all know it, don't let that let you dismiss the challenge in this message. Because it would be easy to say, yeah, people are lousy sometimes, and I'm not here for any of that. My life doesn't need any of that noise, so I'm just going to take care of me and my own. It's easy to slip into sort of a lukewarm welcome that says, well, as long as they're nice to me, I'll be nice to them. But as Jesus would say elsewhere, what credit is that to you? Doesn't everyone do that? Or there's hospitality that says, well, I'll be here, and if anyone should happen to come into my world, I'll be as nice as I can to them. Which is fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't go very far. In part because that way of thinking still acts like it's our world, which, when it is really our world together. Or to go even further, God's world gifted to us. Yes, you are free, thanks be to God. And yes, you need to care for yourself, because that is vital and it's holy. And at the same time, it's not about you. And a life lived in service of yourself is a pretty narrow vision of success. Love your God-given self, and it's not about you. These are pretty hard things to hold together at the same time sometimes, which is why so many of us often get good at one at the neglect of the other. And for those of us who get stuck focusing on ourselves, which in this society, in this culture, is more of us more often than I think we would like to think, hospitality is the right challenge at the right time. Because hospitality is not just a thing to do, it is an orientation. It's a way of life. It's a way of looking in the world that knows that we are in this together. A way of living in the world that knows that my well-being is connected to yours. In fact, during a time when many of us might not be doing the literal hospitality practices of having people in our homes, it's a good time to remember that hospitality is really a spiritual capacity. It's a way of being. It's not just about what we do, it is about what we think. It's about what we believe about the other, whoever that other is to you. Hospitality is the soil of community. And if there was ever a time when we needed to remember that we are in this together, if there was ever a time that it was important that we were willing to sacrifice personal comfort for the good of the whole, if there was ever a time when it was apparent that our futures were bound up together, I think we're living it. Wearing a mask is a form of hospitality, a sacrifice of personal convenience and comfort to care for someone else who might be vulnerable, to create a safe space for everyone. The recognition that what you want or what has affected you personally is not the whole story. That in fact we are all part of an ecosystem that we share. Wear a mask because it's not about you. Listening, always, but especially now, listening is a form of hospitality. It's a way of receiving, of honoring the other. Listen because it isn't all about you. Listen because others are experiencing this community and this world very differently from the way you are, and their experience is no less valid than yours. Listen as though you were being given the gift of someone else's truth, because you are. Service is hospitality. Sometimes literally the cup of cool water for someone who doesn't have it. Active service, lived love, means a hospitality isn't just the willingness to be nice to whomever might show up in your life. Again, as we said, that might be challenging enough from time to time. But hospitality is also about seeing what needs to be done in your life, in our community, in God's world, and going out and getting it done. It's about going out and creating bonds where there aren't any bonds, even when it would be easier to stay disconnected. It's about going out and removing barriers where there shouldn't be any barriers, even if those barriers aren't hindering you personally and in fact might be helping you. The hospitality that comes from working for someone else, with someone else. I don't think there's anything that can create community faster than experiencing ourselves being in it together, like that. More of us than we think, I think, are at times still little ones in the faith. And we can use all the help we can get. It is still very easy to lose trust. So easy to be discouraged. Our faith is still fragile. It is still hard to put ourselves out there. And there's no shortage of stuff out there that will test our faith or give us a reason to not have faith. That's the easy part. To find someone whose faith in God or in society or even faith in themselves, to find someone whose faith is vulnerable and break it, to find someone with courage and discourage them, to give someone who's trying to trust and give them another reason not to, that's the easy part. That happens all the time. To instead meet them where they are and listen to them and welcome them and help them and receive them as the gift from God that they are. That's never been as easy as it sounds. But it might be that it's never been more needed. Thanks be to God. Amen.